Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well. So, as most people will know, I am a big fan of Norse mythology. I've written books on Norse mythology. Loki, God of Rage. I have numerous qualifications in mythologies, including Norse mythology. Me love it quite a bit. In fact, I love it so much that I tend to gravitate towards things that I wouldn't necessarily like, as long as it's faithfully or intelligently inspired by Norse mythology. Typically, Ragnarok on Netflix, the 2 seasons, wouldn't really be something that would interest me, but because it's based on Norse mythology, and by the way, it's a damn good show, you should absolutely watch it. It's brilliant. So, that being said, God of War Ragnarok has just dropped 2 images that I want to talk about today. The first being Thor, and the second being Angrboda. It's mostly the negative backlash that I want to talk about for both of these fictional characters. Okay, so first and foremost, when most people now think of Thor, they think of this guy, Chris Hemsworth. I mean, quite frankly, he is the pinnacle of male fitness, regardless of what role he's doing. Whether he's bulking up to be Thor, or whether he's getting more agile like he's doing at the moment for an Extraction sequel, which also is a really good film. But this isn't how strongmen looked way back when. And there's been a number of images floating around actually showing what an actual strongman today looks like, and showing that that is probably what people thought of when they thought of Thor way back when. Just as a side note, people have said that Chris Hemsworth's body in Thor Endgame, you know, with the fat suit on, is probably more realistic, and that it was done just for laughs. I don't agree with that. I think it was a representation of all the damage that Thor had taken throughout the movies. He'd lost his father, his mother, his brother, he'd lost his home, he'd lost at least half of his people, and that took effect on him. And I think that's where the fat suit came from. That's where Fat Thor came from the MCU, because this man has lost arguably more than anyone else. And that was the result. The result was he stopped trying. So Fat Thor wasn't really done for laughs, in my opinion. Fat Thor was the Thor who had given up. I think that's important to know. Anyway, Thor of Norse mythology, should he look like this? I'm going to say that's fine. There are parts in the historical sources that we have that say Thor was very handsome. But there's also other parts that say no, he was a bit of an uggo. Obviously not using that word. But there are mixed opinions on what Thor should look like based on who was telling the story. Now, typically speaking, yes, big bushy beard. And really strong. That's pretty much the only physical characteristics that we need to see from Thor. Everything else realistically is open to interpretation. He's got to look strong. I think no one's going to argue with that. He's got to look like he can punch out a mountain, which this Thor can absolutely do that. The thing is, with Thor in Norse mythology, it is the personality, it is the moral system, and it's how he holds himself and everyone else that actually matters. And it's part of the reason why I love it's part of the reason why I love Ragnarok on Netflix so much, because Thor's personality in that show is very clear. This is right, this is wrong. Do not cross that line. It doesn't matter who you are. You don't do that. And that is what you would expect from the protector of humanity. Now, in my opinion, we're going to see this Thor. Now, this is before it's come out. This is after I've played God of War 2018, which is actually the only God of War game I've completed. Because The other ones just didn't appeal to me, and it's the Nordic mythology that dragged me to it. In my opinion, it's not necessarily going to be the fact that Loki and Kratos killed his sons. I don't think that is why he's coming to be the big bad of this game, which I think he might be. Definitely Odin might be. If they're going for a trilogy, I think we'll get Odin in the last one, but we might see some more Odin in this one. But from what we've got already, it's set up that Thor is going to be the protagonist of the story, the big bad of the story. Now, Loki in Norse mythology is the father of Fenriswulf, Jormungandr, and Hel. Jormungandr is the one who kills Thor, the giant serpent. The giant serpent kills Thor. Fenris kills Odin. And Hel walks into the land of the living, bringing the armies of all of the dead. Because again, you have to keep in mind that to get to Valhalla, to get to the promised land in Nordic mythology, you had to die in battle. So if you died a peaceful death, you're going to Helheim. If you die of old age, if you die doing something a little bit risky, pretty much you die in anything other than battle, you're going to Helheim, which is Hel's domain. So it's kind of obvious that they would win that one. But for Thor, the protector of humanity, let's also be very clear about this. Ragnarok is not just the end of the Aesir, it is the end of the world. That's important. If Thor is going to stick to the ideals that he has in traditional Norse mythology, Thor is going to be looking at Atreus, Loki, as the threat that he is to life, to human life. Again, the simple fact that his daughter brings the dead back to the realm of the living and pretty much murders people and ends the world is a big thing. We also have to keep in mind that in Nordic mythology there is a class system, and there's a debate between numerous people about whether the class system was introduced because of Christianity or if it was originally that way. I think there's a really interesting discussion to be had to see if Odin was actually brought in with Christianity or if Odin was always there. So basically when it comes to Thor, I'm happy with the way that he's being portrayed. I think it's a more realistic and grounded way for the protector of Midgard to actually look. I think more than anything else, the personality is what matters. Now I am going to contradict myself, because while I do love the idea that Thor is going to be after Atreus and Kratos purely because of the role that his children have in Ragnarok, let's face it, the team and developers that make God of War and made God of War in the past, while they've clearly been inspired by mythologies, they've not been strictly confined by them. And honestly, I'm fine with this. I think so far everything that I've seen from them has been an incredibly faithful representation, as well as giving their own nuances and their own flavour to the source material. I like it. I think it makes for a good story that keeps you guessing. You don't quite know the ending. Now, on to Angrboda. And this is probably one of the biggest things that have just triggered people who can be described by many words. Now, there is an inherent problem with race swapping at the moment. I'll get into why it's an issue in a moment. And there is an issue when it comes to gender swapping. I wrote a blog a few years ago titled something like "The Doctor is Dead," and this is in reference to Doctor Who being transitioned into a woman. Now, it's not because the Doctor went from a man to a woman. It's because the inherent problem that comes with it. The Doctor wasn't turned into a woman because that would be an interesting storyline. They did it for virtue signaling. And when you start off with, "This is my virtue signaling," you destroy the character. That's what I put out in the article, and every time a new season of Doctor Who comes up, I get a massive boom of people reading that, which is brilliant. It's brilliant. But the thing is, they didn't write the Doctor after Peter Capaldi. They wrote Jodie Whittaker pretending to be the Doctor, when Jodie Whittaker herself doesn't actually know anything about Doctor Who, and that shows it. It really just seems like her only research was to watch a few Matt Smith episodes and a few David Tennant episodes, because that's what we get with awful writing. And that's the biggest problem when you swap. RoboCop, going off on a bit of a tangent here, RoboCop is one of my favourite films of all time. I love the first one, I love the second one. Hell, I still get chills when I watch the second one. It was on recently and I got scared of the big ass robot. But the reboot not only race swapped, but gender swapped Lewis. In the reboot, Lewis is a black male detective who is a long-term partner of Alex Murphy. In the original, Alex was brand new, fresh out the academy or something like that, and Lewis was this counter to this new fresh energy. She had been in the game a while. She was tougher than a coffin nail, and yet still human, excellently done, and actually was an integral part of that film, because it was Lewis who brought Alex Murphy back. It wasn't the memories of his wife that just recircled. It was that catalyst of Lewis going, Murphy, it's you. That's what did it, and that was brilliant. But the Lewis in the reboot, despite the fact that that film is full of amazing actors, there was no need for that character to be there. It was pointless. It was a token gesture, which is a problem. Because when you race swap, essentially what you're saying to the demographic that you've swapped to is, you're not good enough, so we're going to give you this. And that's horrible, especially when you combine it with poor writing. Now, RoboCop 20, whenever it was, the reboot of RoboCop didn't necessarily go down this line. Like, they didn't make a big fuss of it. They didn't make Lewis anything, really. You could have taken him out of the film and it would have been more or less the same film, which is a shame because, again, in the original, Lewis was integral to the plot. But it has happened in a number of other situations where you swap gender or you swap race and suddenly this is the Mary Sue. And as I've said in other articles, in fact I pointed out in my Why Captain Marvel Fails, I pointed out why Mary Sues aren't interesting to watch. It's pretty much because if there are no stakes, the audience can't really get involved. Matrix, the first film, was brilliant. It ended with Neo being the one. The subsequent films didn't go too well because Neo was already the one, and you know he can do anything in the universe because he's the one. Whereas in the first film, you're constantly told, is he the one? Is he the one? No, he's not the one. He's not the one. He's not the one. He's not the one. Yeah, he can do stuff, but he's not the one. And then at the end he becomes the one, and that's why it's such a great film. So I think I've laid out why I don't like race, because whenever it's done, it's not done to tell a good story. It's typically spearheaded by people who can't actually write, and they think that standing on a podium screaming at the top of their lungs, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, do as I say, this is great, and if you don't like it, things. That's not how you tell a story. I am one of these people who come out and say everything is political, because everything is political, because politics is in bloody everything. But you don't push that narrative with standing on a stadium saying, I'm right, you're wrong. You weave a story. And in fact, you can look at Lovecraft as a really good example of this. H.P. Lovecraft was a racist. He was a racist. He was also very much in the class system. So as a bit of context, my great-grandfather, Donald Gibson, adopted 2 young girls. These 2 young girls were black, Caribbean heritage. Because of the ages, they were more or less the same age as my mum. So my mum, growing up with these aunties, kind of viewed them more as sisters, and then their kids I viewed more as cousins rather than whatever form of uncle I think that would be. Point is, I've got a lot of people in my family that do not share this skin pigment. So when I voice these issues that I have with race changing, it is not a matter of colour. It's the simple fact that it's done in such a pathetic way that it destroys the character. Now, I would fully admit, probably most people won't do this whole deep dive of characters like I do, because I'm a nerd and this is just what I do. But this is what we see. Even if you're not led A, B, C, D, you'll get to Z. And the Z feeling is that this didn't work and they're going to ruin another character. That's the issue. You have to weave a good story. So with H.P. Lovecraft, he would have valued me a better human being than my cousin, but because I'm poor and haven't got a pot to piss in, he would still view me as human garbage. In his work, if you deep dive and you rip apart these characters, you can see that, but it's not his narrative. That's who he is, that's his views, or was his views. But that's not in the story that he's telling, so it's slightly different. I hope I've explained that well. Don't think I have, but the point is, if you're going to race swap, if you're going to gender swap, you have to do it right. Anne Boleyn was recently race swapped in Channel 4, and it rightly got a lot of negative backlash because it's a historic event. If you wanted to tell that kind of story inspired by these events with a black actress, then you shouldn't have made a historical event. You should have just done a drama. That was the problem that people had, including me mum. On to Angrboda and the backlash that the fact that this character is not white. I hope everyone paid attention for everything I just said and why I'm not a fan of race swapping or gender swap, because it's very rarely done right. But Angrboda is a Jotun. Loki is a Jotun. While not all Jotuns are shapeshifters, it's certainly not uncommon to find one who shapeshifts. Angrboda in Norse mythology gives birth to a snake, a wolf, and a half-chuffing gorgon. A reptile, a mammal, and something that's half dead but very much alive. For Angrboda, it does not fucking matter what colour skin this character has. And again, shapeshifter. Loki, shapeshifter. Angrboda, probably a shapeshifter. Because again, he gives birth to a snake, to a wolf, and to a gorgon. There are reasons to be against race swapping and gender swapping. There are reasons and arguments and evidence to show why it went wrong. And yeah, I get not everyone's going to do the deep dive into why something failed the same way that I do, because I'm just a giant nerd and I really like analysing literature and media and things like that. But Angrboda doesn't have to be or blue or pink or yellow. They can be whatever the original artist wants to be. Let's be very, very clear about God of War's new look. They took the most pivotal, important character from Norse mythology and ripped him out the whole pantheon and then played out scenarios. They took Loki, the embodiment of change, out of that scenario. Loki is the reason why Asgard has the wall. Loki is the reason why Thor has Mjolnir. Loki is the reason why Sif has golden hair. Loki is the reason for so many things. He is the embodiment of change, which is actually why the Aesir don't like him, because the Aesir don't actually like change. But taking Loki, Atreus, out of Norse mythology and having these events carry on, that is a far, far bigger change to the pantheon, to the mythology, than putting in a black girl. There are things to be pissed off about. There are things that are pathetic. I'm actually excited to see what this God of War Ragnarok is going to be like. I actually really enjoyed the story of this version of God of War. I enjoyed this version of the Nordic pantheon that we got in 2018. I am really looking forward to things that come from this. I actually don't have an issue with anything that they've done. If it was historical, I'd be a little pissed off, but only a little pissed off. I'm actually excited to see what they're going to do with this character, because are they going to have Odin meet Angrboda and be oblivious to who she is? Are we actually going to see how someone who looks like Atreus and someone who looks like Angrboda gives birth to a bloody big snake? Oof, the Gorgon. I'm interested to see what they've done, because as far as I can tell, the writers of God of War have done really well. I've really enjoyed their version of this. And again, let's be very, very clear about this fictional game that's taking from fictional events We have a fictional Greek god in a fictional Nordic world interacting with fictional beings. And again, my biggest thing, and the thing I kept saying on Facebook last night with people who were getting so butthurt, what do you expect a woman to look like who gives birth to a reptile, a wolf, and a gorgon? I expect that woman to look like whatever the hell she wants to look like, because she's clearly a fucking shapeshifter. But there you go, that's just my thoughts on it. If you like t-shirt, Broken Work of Art, you can get yours at wrecked1.com. If you can go to tailwind.store, all the merchandise there is eco-friendly, ethically made, and fantastic quality, and all profits go to charity. If you want yourself an amazing bow, like the two you can see over my shoulder there, I will also link mandarinduck.net with my affiliative link. It will not give you a discount, but it will mean that I owe you a bottle of whiskey. That is how it works. Keep safe, guys. I'll take care, and I'll see you next time.